Hey guys, in this month's Disney Rewind, I'm going to be talking about Season 1 of Renegade Nell. So, before I head into my thoughts and feelings on Renegade Nell, quick disclaimer, I don't plan on having any sort of spoilers in this particular video, so yeah, if you haven't seen the show, you should be in the clear. I'm going to try to steer clear of spoilers as best I can. So yeah, let's get going. So, what is Renegade Nell all about? For starters, it is on Disney Plus. It is a 8-part show, miniseries, series. I'm not quite sure. I think there is potential for this show that it could continue for another season, but yeah, the way it ended, it seems like it could just be a satisfying one-off season for all I know. But yeah, I think there could be potential for it to be a multi-season type of show. Who knows? But yeah, Renegade Now follows a young woman and a whole host of characters living in the early 1700s. I believe in the very first episode it said 1704, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, at this time period, Queen Anne is the reigning monarch of England. And yeah, also the big thing during this time period, highwaymen. So yeah, we follow a young woman named Nellie Jackson. Do not call her Nellie, though. She hates being called Nellie. Nell Jackson, she is returning to her home, but everybody thinks that she's been dead for whatever reason. So she comes back and everyone's like, oh my gosh, she's risen back from the dead, lo and behold. So what ends up happening? To get to the point, some stuff happens in the very first episode, and Nell is accused of murder. Thing is, she didn't kill anybody. It was something that was accidental, and she kind of gets wrongfully blamed for this murder. And so she goes on the run, and she's joined by her sisters, who I think are actually maybe her half sisters. I was a little kind of fuzzy on the details. And yeah, events ensue from there. Nell is out to clear her name. She needs to find some people who believe in her, that she did not commit this murder. And yeah, she kind of becomes a highway woman by accident, but not kind of your typical highwayman of the era, because highwaymen of this time period would go out and stop carriages full of wealthy people and take all their valuable possessions. And Nell is kind of the opposite of that. She's kind of stopping people, but sometimes it's through accident or through other means that she needs, like if it has somebody inside, it's like, hey, I need you to help my cause, So yeah, she's kind of a reluctant highway woman, if you will. She's not there to like rob and keep the riches for herself necessarily. Yeah, the show, you guys, it was a pleasant surprise. I quite liked it. It's definitely not perfect. I will get to the big thing that I had an issue with this show. I'm going to talk first about the positives. First up, this show is created by Sally Wainwright, and that was kind of a big hook for me to watch this show, to be quite honest, because the last show that Sally Wainwright created was the HBO show Gentleman Jack, and I freaking love Gentleman Jack, you guys. So yeah, when I saw Sally Wainwright as the creator, I was like, oh god, I gotta check out this show. It's gotta be good, right? And not only Sally Wainwright as the creator of Renegade Now, but also a big thing, costume design. Because while I was watching this show, I was like, there is something about the costume design of this that looks exactly kind of like the costume design of Gentleman Jack. And yeah, sure enough, I looked up the costume designer for both Gentleman Jack and Renegade Nell, and it's the same guy. It's Tom Pye. So yeah, that was a bonus there too. So yeah, let me say this. There were certain things about this show that thoroughly impressed me. For starters, Sally Wainwright as the creator of this show. I don't think she wrote episodes, but because I think she wrote episodes of like Gentleman Jack, for instance. But yeah, I don't think she wrote any episodes for this. And then yeah, like I said, the exact same costume designer between both shows. So yeah, I found the costuming of this show to be absolutely fantastic. It looked period appropriate for the most part, because yeah, considering that this show is on Disney Plus and it's a young adult show, I honestly went into this show expecting the costuming and makeup and hair design. I expected all of that to look way too modern. But no, they held back on this show. They didn't sit and kind of go for a modern look at all, I don't think. The costuming looked and felt period appropriate. The makeup felt period appropriate to me. And yeah, even the hair felt period appropriate, because there's a lot of instances where you see these characters running around and they look dirty. You know, their faces are dirty, their hair is not perfect, their costuming is dirty and grubby, you know. So I was just really impressed with that angle. Once again, considering that this is a young adult show, a lot of times young adult historical pieces, they want everything to look beautiful and glamorous, and they want to romanticize a certain time period. And yet nothing on here I don't think is romanticized, you know. Our main character, Nell Jackson, she does not have this romanticized look to her at all. Her clothes are oftentimes dirty. She barely has any sort of makeup on. I'm sure she does have makeup on, but it's like not noticeable whatsoever. And yeah, her hair, she has this long red hair, and a lot of times it's like frizzy and all over the place. It's not perfect, you know. If this was like a show on the CW, for instance, she would have been glamorous and gorgeous, and her hair would have been flowing and beautiful and ringlets, you know. So that was just a big part of this show that I was just really impressed with, was hair, costuming, makeup. It gave the show a certain type of quality and an aesthetic that looked like top notch, like you might see from other types of historical period dramas on other big networks and streaming platforms and whatnot. I was not expecting this type of show with this much kind of quality to it on Disney Plus. And another thing that I was impressed with this show was the lack of CGI. You guys, I was kind of worried going into this there would be an overabundance of CGI. There is a supernatural fantasy twist to this story, and I'll get to that in a bit. So that's where kind of a lot of the CGI comes into play. But yeah, this show incorporated very minimal CGI, and everything was, for the most part, what I could tell, was very practical. Nothing looked like outrageously horrible like some stuff on Disney Plus can look like for certain other shows, you know. And the use of real locations, you guys. When Nell and her family and their friends, you know, people that are with them, when they're traveling around, like out in the woods, or if they're at grand estates, or if they're at places like out in a city or whatever, the locations were real. You guys, real buildings. Yeah, I'm assuming there were probably some sets in there, but yeah, for the most part, like outdoor shots and everything, just gorgeous use of locations, and nothing looked cheap, you know. The quality of the show, like I said, was just really impressive to me, that it didn't look or feel cheap. Like, they were really putting their budget to good use in this show, I think. And another thing that I really enjoyed was the incorporation of real history into this show, because sometimes I feel like young adult period pieces, they want to shy away, and they're afraid to get into like the real history of a time period. And like I said at the very start of this review, we're in the early 1700s. Queen Anne is the Queen of England at this time, so she is a pivotal character in this show. She's not like a huge character, but she is still very pivotal to a couple plot points that happen, and she's played wonderfully by Jodie May. Just for a quick shout out. So yeah, not only the use of Queen Anne in this show, but yeah, just also the real history of the Jacobite uprising and rebellion, however you want to kind of word it or put it. Like I watched the TV show Outlander, for instance, and that takes place a good 50 years before the events of Renegade Nell. But yeah, a big thing, a big part of Outlander is like the Jacobite rebellion and whatnot, and yet putting Charles Stuart back on the throne of England. So yeah, I didn't realize the Jacobite rebellion was a thing that was going on for that lengthy amount of time. So I loved that kind of those origins of the Jacobite rebellion in there, and it was a thing of people wanting to put the Stuarts back on the throne of England, essentially. Because, yeah, once again, taking place here in the early 1700s with this show, wanting to put, I believe, James Stuart, one of the Jameses, putting James Stuart back on the throne. Whereas, yeah, by the time we get to Outlander, that's wanting to put, I believe, Charles Stuart back on the throne of England. So I love the use of like the Jacobite uprising, the Jacobite rebellion as kind of background noise to what's going on in the narrative. And yeah, that comes into play hugely kind of near the end of the season and whatnot. So yeah, once again, just some really impressive things going on with the show that totally worked for me. Like I said, hair, makeup, costuming, use of real locations, use of real actual history, practical effects, all of that totally worked for me. And then kind of moving into the cast very quickly, I really enjoyed this cast as well. Just an amazing set of actors and people who could actually act. You know, once again, this is a young adult show. I kind of went into it expecting not to be really well acted, but I was really impressed with the acting as well. And yeah, definitely our lead character of Nell, played by Louisa Harland, she just absolutely shined in the role of Nell. She was very believable. She was very natural. And they even give Nell a background that she was part of like the military or the army or something like that, like prior to her coming home. She kind of has that bit of a background. And yet Nell is like a very masculine type of character. She's not womanly in any sort of way, and she doesn't conform to gender norms of the period. And yes, she hates wearing dresses. So yeah, a lot of times she's kind of wearing what looks like she's probably wearing like maybe her military gear sometimes, you know. But I love Louisa Harland as Nell, and yeah, she's not once again, this being a young adult show, she's not overdone with makeup, modern day makeup, or modern day clothing, or modern day hair, you know? She's just completely herself and completely natural, and that made me believe in her as this type of character, you know, that is just much more masculine in nature. And yeah, that kind of, like I said, she has kind of that army background that they kind of explain pretty quickly. And so when she is kind of fighting, I can believe her that she can fight and kick butt, you know. And then another character that was a highlight for me was the character of Devereaux, played by Frank Delane. Frank Delane was probably easily my favorite character on this show, to be quite honest. Frank Delane is playing a character that is a highwayman, but he kind of poses outside of that as like a wealthy gentleman. And he's oftentimes kind of your comedic relief, and I just love his wit and banter with Nell. They just balanced each other out so wonderfully well, because yeah, Devereaux can sometimes just be a complete idiot. But yeah, Frank Delane just plays Devereaux with just such glee and joy and energy, and that just energized me watching his performance, you know. So yeah, Frank Delane, definitely a must while you're watching this show, I think. And just to touch on Jolie Richardson really quickly, Jolie Richardson, of all people, is in this show. She's playing like a journalist or something, and yeah, she's like Frank Delane's, his character, like his intended, his fiance of some sorts, however that came about. I did like Jolie Richardson in this show, but I found her to be vastly underused. It's like, for God's sake, you have Jolie Richardson. Use the woman. So yeah, that was pretty much all of my positives with this show. Let's move into the big thing I had an issue with, you guys. As I really kind of, I vaguely kind of mentioned this kind of somewhere earlier in the video, there is a supernatural fantasy element to this show. And you guys, it did not work for me. And that's what took down the show a couple pegs for me. Like I said, I was just so impressed with certain elements about this show. And I really, really wish there was not a supernatural fantasy element to the show whatsoever. I think the fantasy elements kind of cheapened the show to some degree. And I don't know, there's just something about it that didn't gel with me, didn't work with me. I think the nature of the narrative of this show, I really feel like it could have totally worked just fine without the fantasy elements. Nell, in episode 1, there's some things happening, and she's about to get into a fight or whatever, or no, she does get into a fight, and all of a sudden this little light bulb this little light bulb just appears out of nowhere, and it like floats into her, and all of a sudden she's gifted with like supernatural abilities, and she has like extra strength and whatnot, and she just flip people around left and right all over the places. And yeah, this little light bulb is like a fairy or a pixie of some sort, and his name is Billy Blind. And yeah, he's in the entire show, and yeah, whenever Nell is in situations where she needs to get into a fight, Billy Blind, he like enters through her, and all of a sudden she does have extra gifts, you know. All of that just didn't work for me. Once again, they mentioned that Nell has a military background of some sort. You don't need this little pixie entering her to give her that unnecessary extra strength and energy. If anything, I feel like that kind of cheapened her character, because I feel like she was kind of just a badass in her own way without needing that additional oomph, if that makes any sort of sense. And a lot of times, whenever she did have that extra strength, it made her practically unstoppable and unbeatable, and it just made her way too perfect. You know, I would have preferred her to be a heroine with flaws and issues, and yeah, even though she does maybe have that military background, yeah, like she's not perfect with her fighting, you know, that she can be hurt, she can be injured. So I didn't like the use of the little pixie man, Billy Blind. I didn't really like that. It didn't really work for me. I feel bad for the actor, because I think the actor playing Billy Blind, I mean, he was definitely doing his all and doing what the script called for, you know, but yeah, I just did not find him necessary whatsoever, unfortunately. And then, yeah, we have another character played by, is it Adrian Lister? Yeah. Normally, I really like Adrian Lister and just random British things that he pops up in. Adrian Lister is playing a guy named Poynton, and he's like an advisor to Queen Anne and whatnot. And Poynton, he dabbles in the occult. And there's a lot of crazy shenanigans that he causes in over the course of the narrative, that he calls up, like, weird supernatural figures to hunt down Nell and whatnot. And yeah, Poynton, I wouldn't have been bothered if Poynton maybe just dabbled in the occult, and you were kind of left to your imagination, like, is he really dabbling with the occult for real, or are we kind of, or is it not really, you know? I would have loved more subtlety with that, you know. Instead, he is actually summoning creatures. You know, he's actually summoning creatures and beasts to chase after Nell and her friends. I would have preferred subtlety there. So yeah, the character of Poynton, I think he was an effective character in a sense, like whenever he was doing things that involved politics and his maneuvering within the court of Queen Anne, you know, that all worked for me. But yeah, with him, when he would sit and summon up devils and whatever, no, that did not work for me. And then kind of moving into the character of Sophia, I think, because she kind of gets wrapped into everything going on with Poynton, her and her brother James. And Sophia, well, at the start of the show, you think that her brother James is going to be the big villain of the show. But then that kind of gets quickly turned around, because then Sophia kind of, alongside Poynton, Sophia kind of becomes a big, huge, pivotal villain of the show. And I think Sophia had really wonderful potential to be the big highlight villain of the season, and she kind of ultimately didn't work for me either. I would have liked a lot more subtlety with her as well, because I like the whole thing of her, that she's a woman in a man's world, and she's looking out for her brother, she's looking after herself, because there's some events that happen, like in episode 1 and whatnot, that involve Nell. Yeah, Sophia and her brother, they have the potential that their estate could be taken away from them, they can be thrown out, you know, and yeah, she is looking out for her and her brother. So I liked all of that really worked for me. But yeah, once she kind of starts dabbling in the occult with Poynton as well, no, that kind of just was kind of stupid and silly to me. I didn't really get it. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the show, you guys. In conclusion, it's a shame it's honestly, it's a shame that the supernatural fantasy elements kind of take the show down a few pegs, because I think the show would have worked perfectly as just your standard historical period drama. It didn't need to be all flashy with the fantasy stuff, I don't think, you know? Once again, what was so impressive about this show was the quality of like the hair, the costuming, the makeup, the locations, the use of practical effects, you know? All of that was just so wonderfully done and really immersed me into this time period. And once again, the fantasy elements kind of cheapened the show, weirdly enough. I would have liked more subtlety and vagueness. Once again, if characters were dabbling in the occult, sure, go ahead, but don't make it so obvious, you know? I would have liked it to be kind of left unclear for, or leave it more for like interpretation, you know? Like, are they really dealing with the mystical, magical arts, you know? So yeah, considering this was a young adult show on Disney Plus, I was very impressed with it. I definitely recommend checking this show out if you're kind of on the fence with it. For someone else, the fantasy elements might work better for you than they did for me. But yeah, definitely check this show out if it sounds kind of vaguely interesting to you, because I think you might honestly be a little surprised about it, because I certainly was, because I checked it out thinking it's a Disney Plus young adult show, it's probably not going to be that good, you know, I'll just watch it because I have Disney Plus for the hell of it, you know. Once again, I was very, very impressed with it. Once again, the fantasy elements kind of cheapened, but I'll get over it. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on Renegade Nell. Maybe we'll get another season, who knows? But yeah, you guys in the comments below, let me know if you have seen Renegade Nell over on Disney Plus. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Just let me know your thoughts down below. Feel free to talk about spoilers. So that is it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.